Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another PC Boys podcast. It is your boy, Logan. So, this is my second time recording this podcast. I'm still releasing the audio version of this podcast, but it's going to be my first take, so there will be some differences between the YouTube version and the audio version of the podcast. I have no reason to record the audio one because it was fine. But today we're going to be talking about the Marvels, and how the projections for it aren't that great right now. We are also going to be talking about Echo. So we're going to be talking about Marvel from a positive and negative perspective today. And I'm going to save the Echo stuff for later because that's the positive stuff. But before we get started, I will have the link tree in the description below. Please go follow our Instagram and Twitter. That is where we post most often. And that is where we update, of course, whenever we upload a new podcast first. And also join the Discord because I want to grow out that community and I can be directly in contact with you guys and put up polls and stuff to figure out what kind of videos you guys want me to make. Or if you guys have suggestions also, that is welcome. Rather that's on the Rumble side of content or on the main podcast side of content. But without further ado, we are going to get into today's topics. So, starting off with the Marvels. Currently sitting on Rotten Tomatoes at 58%, which is not good. Now, it doesn't surprise me, however, that we are currently sitting at 58% because I was watching a lot of YouTubers do reviews earlier on the Marvels, and it doesn't sound good. I was listening to, like, Jeremy Johns and The Real Rejects, and even, some other people that are very, lenient on MCU movies when they aren't that great, and they were all explaining the villain sucked, and there's no story in this movie. And that's a big problem, considering the fact, especially, that we're talking about a Marvel film where you need to have you need to have a story for any movie. I mean, you always gotta have a story, but, like, in Marvel movies especially, if there's no plot, then what's the point of our heroes doing what they're doing, right? So it doesn't surprise me that this is at a 58%, but earlier it was sitting at 56, so it did go up a few percentage points in terms of reviews. So it did go up a little bit. But for the most part, there is not much good news about this film. There have been a lot of talks about, the fact that it's fallen short on the CGI area. It's fallen short on the story, as I mentioned earlier. But the one thing that people did say is that the performances were actually pretty decent. So what I heard was Iman Vellani was the standout of this movie. And I'm not surprised by that because I was very impressed with her in the Miss Marvel show. While I didn't think the show was anything spectacular, I thought the show was actually very good because of her and her performance and her youthful, energetic self. And her bringing that energy to the forefront of her performances really helps being, in tune with wanting to watch the show and, that character. So she was told to be a standout, not surprised by that, and, I'm very happy for her. When it comes to Monica Rambeau, her character was said to be more like a plot device or MacGuffin device, which is really sad that that character got demoted that hard. But Brie Larson, actually, there was some good news said. So my biggest critique of the first Captain Marvel movie is the fact that Brie Larson's character was basically a brick wall with no, emotion or anything. And I'm glad to be proven wrong this time, apparently. They did do stuff with her character, and they actually gave her a personality and stuff, which is good. I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if that's true or not, but if that is the case, then, good on Marvel, and, hopefully they can continue that with her character. Like I said, Captain Marvel 1 was boring, but if her character was at least enjoyable, then, there would have been something there. Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury in this was said to be comic relief, pretty much, and that's really all it was. And Dar-Ben, the villain of this movie, was said to be the worst MCU villain. And that's pretty bad, because the MCU doesn't have great villains. Even in the golden age of Marvel, where the villains were average at best, apparently she's worse than that. they're having obviously very few good villains, Vulture and obviously Thanos and Loki, but I mean, outside of those three, like, there's not many, like, really good villains in the MCU. So the fact that she's said to be one of the worst, if not the worst, is pretty bad. But people said that people did well with the performances, you know, based upon what they were given script-wise, which, you know, obviously, you know, you can only do so good with how your script is. But yeah, so that's kind of where the Marvels is at. Now, in terms of box office, I don't have it pulled up. I did when I did the first take. But if you guys don't believe me, you can obviously pull it up on, you know, Google and stuff. But Variety, Deadline were reporting that the Marvels is expecting a $60 to $65 million opening weekend. And earlier in the day, I think it was, they were talking about $50 to $70 million opening. So the gap has shortened a little bit to 60 to 65 million in terms of projections, which isn't good. That, you know, is pretty bad. They were, that's literally, I would say, not even 20 million above the Incredible Hulk's opening and Ant-Man, which I think both of those movies were in the 50 millions. I think Incredible Hulk was like $55.8 million opening weekend, and then Ant-Man was 57 something million dollars. So yeah, it's not much above those two movies in terms of projections, which is not good. And that's also considering that The Incredible Hulk was, you know, made in 2008. Like, it was one of the earlier Marvel movies made. And there wasn't like this big brand recognition with Marvel back then. And then with Ant-Man, he's just a smaller character. So that was kind of to be expected that it wouldn't do as well because of that. Now, obviously some people might be wondering to themselves, well, how is Captain Marvel 2, or The Marvels, depending on where you live in the world, depends on what it's called, how is it doing worse than the original movie? The original movie was a $1 billion movie. Yes, it was, but there's two major factors. Number one, Captain Marvel was to appear in Avengers Endgame, and people wanted to know about her character. So they went to see Captain Marvel to figure out who the fuck this character is and what motivates her and all that. Even though she wasn't in the movie that much in Avengers Endgame. Number two, Captain Marvel was released between two of the biggest movies in Marvel's history, and two of the biggest movies that also reside in the top 10 movies ever of box office, you know, take, being Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. So there was hype going into the movie and going out of that movie for from one Avengers film to another Avengers film. It was placed in between the two. So clearly it was going to make money because it was that one Marvel movie that was in between two of the biggest movies Marvel had put out. So yeah, it made a lot of money because of that. Now, this movie is not surrounded or in between two big Marvel movies. And now the lack of character enthusiasm for Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and I think Proton or Photon, I think, is the character of Monica Rambeau. I don't really know, okay? I know I'm a comic nerd, don't know everything, but I think, like, that's one of her names along those lines. But all three characters are relatively either unpopular or not big characters in the comics, right? When it comes to Captain Marvel, right, as I stated way back when I talked about Captain Marvel years ago, her character's comics been rebooted many times. Not a lot of people are big fans of the character, and they didn't sell well, hence why they had to reboot the character a lot. Monica Rambeau's character, a very obscure character from the comics, not many people know about her. Miss Marvel people do know about, but she's not a huge Marvel character. She's bigger, I think, now than she used to be. I remember reading her origin comic and stuff, but within recent memory, the only thing people could have, you know, noticed Kamala Khan from, especially if they're not, of course, you know, fans of the comics or didn't read her comics, is her show on Disney Plus, which I enjoyed, even though it wasn't super great and groundbreaking. I thought it was enjoyable, and I loved her performance. Great character. And on top of that, the Marvel Avengers game that, you know, got taken off storefronts and off online stores recently because the game was abysmal. But those are the only two places that Miss Marvel has been prominent outside of the comics. And in the comics, in and of themselves, she's not even a super big character. Bigger now than she used to be, but still not super big. To the point where everybody knows Miss Marvel. Like, you hear Batman, you hear Spider-Man, everybody knows, like, background of the character and everything, and they don't even have to be a comic book nerd to know that. But with Miss Marvel, it's not the same. So yeah, you basically have a movie with 3 characters that are either unpopular or not very well known, and it's not in between any Avengers movies, so naturally, the hype around this movie, based upon the character standpoint alone, isn't there. So, that's one factor. And then there's obviously the factor that the last Captain Marvel movie was boring, and a lot of people are like, yeah, it wasn't that great of a movie, which doesn't make the hype for this movie that big. So there's a lot of things going against it, from the reviews to the fact that apparently there's no plot, the characters are not big in the comics or in pop culture in general, and apparently the villain is just a female version of Ronan the Accuser, and that's it. Like, there's nothing major about the character. So yeah, there's a lot going against this movie. Like I said, for Iman Vellani, I feel bad for her because I feel like, she brings a lot of energy to the MCU and to her character of Kamala Khan, and I enjoyed her performance. And I feel really, really bad that this being her first, big Marvel movie, not just a show, that it's probably not going to make a lot of money or be received that well. But a lot of people are saying she is the standout and giving her credit, so at least hopefully that will soften the blow, for her in terms of everything. It's not her fault, I feel bad for her. And she's the youngest of all of them. But it also sounds like I said, they actually made Brie Larson's character enjoyable and likable. And they gave her some emotional beats and stuff, which, if that's true, then great on Marvel. And, I'm happy that they finally made Captain Marvel, made us feel something, if this happens to be true. But if it's not true, then it's like, now you got me excited and now I'm disappointed. Because, like I said, while I don't agree with Brie Larson's, personal politics and stuff like that, and while I'm not a big fan of her acting-wise, I did like her in Kong Skull Island. But while I'm not a big Brie Larson fan, if her character in the MCU, being Captain Marvel, if they make her likable in terms of writing her, it doesn't matter what I think about her in real life. It doesn't matter what I think about her in other movies. If they do it well, they write it well, then that's fine. I'm not one of these people that are well, I can't enjoy the movie because this person doesn't agree with me ideologically, or I can't watch this movie and enjoy it, because it has good writing and stuff. I'm somebody that will enjoy the movie if it's done well. Okay, and the characters, regardless of who's playing them, right? That's just how I view things, I can enjoy the art. For instance, with Spider-Man 2 recently, I love the game. It's great, but I have my gripes with it. I think it's worth the playthrough, it's worth the buy, but I have my gripes with the game. And for those of you that haven't checked out my Spider-Man 2 review, that is available digitally, basically anywhere you can find podcasts. But for most of you, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and Amazon Music. Those would be the big ones. Or iHeartRadio. If you guys listen to iHeartRadio as your main thing, I'm on there too. But yeah, so go check out that episode. I do a good review of the game, and I go in depth on the things that I really didn't like about it, for those of you that like my rants. But yeah, so ultimately, that's the sad news about the Marvels. Now, let's talk about some good news. The Echo Show. Now, I'm not going to pull up any more windows or anything, because every time I seem to play around with the windows and I have OBS going in the background, for some reason, it pauses my video for long chunks of time. Hence why I had to redo this video, because the last time I did it, it was all fucked up and it was frozen halfway through. So, not going to pull up any more tabs or anything. But, so the Echo Show, they released a trailer unexpectedly a few days ago. I think it was close to a week ago now. And blew me and the internet away. Because this trailer opened up with Wilson Fisk beating down an ice cream man for mocking Maya when she was a little girl, coming out of a school, it appeared to be. And we finally have a TV mature Marvel show that is going to be dark, it's going to be gritty. The trailer felt like Daredevil, Punisher, Netflix, Marvel show kind of vibe, which is great. That's awesome. That's a compliment. So watching the trailer, it was fun. It was bro, Marvel's onto something. Like, they finally got my interest on something. And no less on a character that isn't that big. So you know how earlier I was talking about like Captain Marvel not being a big character and stuff? Okay. Here is a situation where you are taking a obscure character, but you're getting people interested. Why? Because they decided to do something different. In a good way. Not like, oh, we're going to change things up for the sake of changing it up. No. They're like, we're going to do a mature show. People are expecting a TV, 14 Marvel show. We're going to give them a TV mature, which is the, TV R-rated equivalent Marvel show. So when people saw the violence, they were like, oh yeah, especially the adults in the room were like, oh yeah, I'm fucking ready for this shit. And everybody that I watched that reacted to the trailer, even people that despise the MCU were like, that actually looks interesting. I might watch it. The fact that they even say I might watch it says a lot. Because if people that dislike the MCU are going to give it a chance and actually watch it, that's saying something. And I know there's going to be the group out there that are like, but it's a female-led show, Logan. I thought you didn't like that stuff. I was like, I don't care if it's a female-led show as long as the writing is good. Like a lot of these female-led shows and movies lately just have shitty writing. And that's why I can't get into it, right? Writing a relatable character that isn't like shaming men or putting men down all the time or... Excuse me, Jesus, I almost had a big cough. Being like ultra feminist or something, like, you stay away from that shit and you just make a good character like Kate Bishop and stuff, like, yeah, it's enjoyable, right? But people don't understand. There's a certain balance you have to strike. There's a certain balance you have to strike. But no, I was very impressed with the trailer. A lot of other people were too. The reaction online is, I wasn't interested in this character, but now I'm interested in the show. Even John Campea was like, I wasn't excited for Echo. I watched the trailer and I was like, okay, now I'm excited. I'm actually, interested in this show a lot more than I was prior. And it's like, well, that whole, like, shock factor of Marvel Studios, not Marvel Entertainment, which did the Netflix series and stuff, which was separate from Marvel Studios. Marvel Studios themselves and Disney greenlit a Marvel mature project with blood, gore, and violence, and not shying away from it. Now, granted, yes, Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and The Punisher, the Netflix Marvel shows, right, that were done under Marvel Entertainment and not Marvel Studios, are canon to the MCU that Marvel Studios has built. They take place in the same universe as all the MCU movies. They were just done by a different company. But now Marvel Studios is finally starting to do the mature stuff, which is great. And obviously this show is going to incorporate Kingpin and Daredevil. And Daredevil and Kingpin are going to be in shows, or in this show, that's TV mature. Meaning they're going to feel like themselves. Because obviously anybody that watched She-Hulk and saw Daredevil in that, there was like glimpses of like, oh, they could have brought Daredevil back. Like they almost did, but they didn't quite get there. And same thing with Kingpin and Hawkeye. When you're watching it, you're like, why is Kingpin not bloodthirsty? Why is he not beating the fuck out of, Kate Bishop? He's like, he doesn't care that she's there. Like, he didn't act the same, right? And I know it's technically like, oh, well, he's grown a little bit. It's Kingpin. Kingpin beats the fuck out of everybody, right? So... Even in Marvel Spider-Man, for the PS4 and stuff, he was still beating the fuck out of everybody in that game. So, I just find it funny that, he acted very different in Hawkeye. I enjoyed Hawkeye, but, like, Kingpin was kind of the part where I was like, I was happy to see him, but he was a little off. Same thing with Daredevil and She-Hulk, but now we're going to get a show where Daredevil and Kingpin will act like they, at least I hope, they act like they did in the Netflix series. And judging on the trailer, at least Kingpin will. But with Daredevil, we'll just have to wait to see. But I have confidence that they will do Daredevil and Kingpin justice because they had, for this Echo show, they have the writers from Daredevil and The Punisher. So I'm like, okay, so Daredevil and, Kingpin will probably act like their Netflix counterparts. Thank fuck, hopefully. But yeah, very excited with it. It looks great. It's dark. It's gritty. Also, along with Echo being released, oh yeah, another piece of information. All 5 episodes are getting released on the same day. So the day Echo hits Disney Plus and Hulu for a limited amount of time, they're going to be releasing all 5 episodes at once. So kind of like how Netflix did it and how you binged stuff on Netflix, they're doing it like that. And I think that this has to do with like Marvel changing their release plan. Like they used to do it like week by week, but now they're changing things up, and I think they're testing the waters with releasing everything at once. They also released a new banner of Marvel projects called Marvel Spotlight. And for those of you that don't know, Marvel Spotlight used to be essentially comic stories that were centered on a character, and you didn't need to read other Marvel comics. So for instance, I showed this when I did my first recording. I'm glad I kept it right next to me. But, so I have part of the Pop Funko comic covers collection. This is a Marvel Spotlight Moon Knight cover. And they did this for other characters, but essentially, it is a issue, or multiple issues, that, center on a character-driven story. And you don't have to read the other Marvel comics for. And that's essentially the same philosophy for the TV movie side of things, where these Marvel Spotlight projects are going to be character-driven stories that you don't have to watch every other MCU, Disney Plus show and movie to understand what's going on in the show. So you know how, for any of you that did watch the Netflix stuff, how it was its own contained story? That's what they're doing here. And it takes place in the MCU, like the movies and other Disney Plus shows do, but it's going to be very, like, ground level, street level Marvel, and it's going to be darker. So things like Blade, probably going to be under the Marvel Spotlight, Daredevil, and I think they're going to be making Daredevil rated TVMA as well. Blade is also rated R. That was confirmed by the director. I can't remember if I said that or not earlier. But anyways, so these kinds of projects, like the darker Marvel stuff and the more character-centric Marvel projects, will go underneath Marvel Spotlight. And then, of course, like the grandiose, like Avengers and, like, you know, connecting films will still be as they are now. And I'm glad they're doing this, because things like Daredevil, things like Echo, things that are on the ground level that don't need to be connected to fucking Kang and, like, you know, Galactus and, like, big Avengers stuff, or the cosmic shit, like, you don't need to connect Daredevil to all that. Like, you don't need to do that. And I'm glad Marvel is finally making a dedicated service, or not a service, but a dedicated classification for these mature Marvel products and these ground level products, which I think is great. So that is going to be launching, or Marvel Spotlight will be launching with Echo when it releases, I believe, on January 10th on Disney Plus. So yeah, so that's something that Marvel is also doing. But it's great news, you know, although with, you know, the Marvel projects that we've gotten with, you know, the Marvels and all the other stuff prior, She-Hulk and stuff, yes, it's been lackluster, and yes, it sucked, and there have been few good movies, like Shang-Chi, solid movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, solid movie, Doctor Strange, kind of in the middle, Loki, you know, pretty good. I personally like Moon Knight, not everybody did, but when it comes down to it, Marvel's been, for the most part, not putting good content out. And to see Marvel use Echo as a chance to introduce something new to their audience, more, and, you know, give content to a more mature audience, I think is going to bring older Marvel fans back, right? People that grew up with the MCU that are now adults or late in their teens are now going to be consuming the adult content. And obviously, as the newer Marvel generation, you know, kids grow up, they will then get introduced to the adult content as well. So it's a win-win. I think Marvel needed to expand anyways beyond their PG-13, you know, TV general or TV-14 ratings and stuff, because when it comes to Marvel Comics, there are dark stories that cannot be done justice through PG-13. Even, like, Venom Let There Be Carnage, in my opinion, should have been rated R. Because doing Carnage without an R rating was a bad idea. Did I enjoy the movie? Yes. I loved, you know, Venom Let There Be Carnage. But was I very disappointed that I didn't get to see Carnage do Carnage shit? Yes. You know? So, but I'm glad Marvel Studios is stepping into the rated R realm. Even fucking Sony is stepping into the rated R Marvel stuff with Kraven. Hopefully Venom 3 can be R rated. That's a little hope of mine. I doubt it will be. But even Sony is doing an R-rated Marvel movie. Even though it was supposed to come out this year and got delayed to next year, even Sony is like, we should make R-rated content. Because at the very least, if your movie's dog shit and you have R-rated content, it'll be entertaining to watch. Good fight scenes and stuff, you know. But, yeah. So, I'm glad Marvel's spicing things up, doing something a little different. Even though technically they did do it with the Netflix stuff, but it wasn't Marvel Studios, it was Marvel Entertainment. But, either way, it's good that they're trying something new. You can still keep the, you know, kid-friendly Marvel content, and that's gonna stay. But I think introducing adult content is good too. And telling stories like Ghost Rider, Werewolf by Night, Blade, you know, if you want to go into the realm of like monsters and vampires and go into like that darker side of Marvel, the Midnight Suns and stuff, yeah, you want to be able to have the R rating available to you. Because those are darker stories. Marvel Zombies, right? We know Marvel Zombies is a project in development at Marvel Studios. I think it's supposed to be animated. Make that TV mature. Perfect. That it should be. So yes, I'm happy that Marvel is deciding to make more content and do it in different ways. So I'm happy about that. But that is all I have for the podcast. Thank you all very much for joining. I hope to catch you all in the next one. I'm still currently trying to get my cousin to work out a time to do the Five Nights at Freddy's review, and if he doesn't get back to me within about a week, I'm just going to do it myself. And we can finally talk about that, because I know people have been waiting for that review. But thank you very much for listening. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next one.